Which historical figure sounds made up? Joshua Norton I, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. He was just a crazy homeless student in San Francisco who used to walk around in full uniform and ordered people around. Eventually the whole city started humoring him, saluting when he passed, and local businesses began accepting currency he created. He gained such notoriety that his decrees actually gained some traction with the community. When he died, over 10,000 people lined the streets for his processional. Teddy Roosevelt once a gang stole the only boat in town during a blizzard. He built a boat, traveled down river to catch them, caught them, refused to use handcuffs because the frostbite could kill them, and instead stayed up straight for days to bring them all to justice alive. And that's only the beginning. I've been fascinated with the Roosevelts for years. Not just Teddy was a badass, it was passed down the line. Teddy III was wounded in World War I, served in World War II and wounded again. Was not only the only US general to land on D-Day, but was the oldest person, and was vital in coordinating a plan to assault the German defenses. His son Quentin also landed, and they became the only father-son duo to land on the beaches. Teddy III had a brother who was a fighter pilot during World War I, and was killed in combat. Archie, son of Teddy and brother of Teddy III, was wounded in combat in World War I and World War II with the damage coming to the same knee. Teddy III's grandson would also go on to become a Navy SEAL and served in Vietnam. Military families are just like that. Everyone serves. My parents are combat vets. My grandparents met on a medical ship. Grandpa got blowed up. I'm the only male in my line for at least 7 generations not to serve. Luckily, I won't be dying like a lot of my uncles. Juan Pujol Garcia. Aka, the random Spanish dude who wanted to spy on Nazis so badly that, after being turned down by the British, he decided to go to the Nazis, turn himself into a double agent using newsreels and a tourist's guide to England. Be so good at that he was wanted by the British government, and eventually going from random guy giving fake information to Nazis to an actual spy for the British. He was so effective that, among other things, he was literally handed the strongest German encryption codes, which he promptly turned over to Bletchley Park. Probably the wildest story was his involvement with Operation Fortitude, aka the misinformation campaign around D-Day. After telling the Germans that the real invasion would be on a different beach, this is the part with the inflatable tanks, BTW, he sent a message with minimal info on the actual D-Day plans at 3 AM the night before it was going down. The Germans didn't respond until 8 AM, which then allowed him to lay out pretty much the entire thing, which, at this point, was entirely useless. He then proceeded to chew out the Nazis for their incompetence, the quote being, "I cannot accept excuses or negligence. Were it not for my ideals I would abandon the work." And then the Nazis apologized. He was so trusted by the Germans that he got the Iron Cross, which required Hitler's personal authorization. He was also awarded the MBE, making him one of the few non-Brits to receive that honor. After the war, he feared reprisal from surviving Nazis, so he faked his death from malaria and disappeared. After 35 years, he was found to be living in Brazil and running a bookstore and gift shop. Wojtek, a bear that served in the Polish army during World War II. He was picked up by Polish soldiers in Iran when he was a cub, and later he was branded as an official soldier and given the rank of private. Apparently he was really friendly and social. He loved playing with the soldiers and fake fighting. He would eat cigarettes that they gave him. They would bring him to cinemas, and he would even get drunk with them. During the Battle of Mont Cassino he saw the soldiers carrying boxes of ammo and started mimicking them, and he brought a lot more than any human. After the war he was transported to a zoo, where he lived out the rest of his life. The soldiers still constantly visited him, and they would jump in his cage to play and fight with him like in the good old days, which always shocked any other visitors. A monument was built in his memory in Krakow. This story sounds like some complete BS made up by the Polish army to boost morale, but it's all documented and very much true. He also discovered and mauled a Nazi spy. Blackbeard. The man lit his face on fire to seem more scary. He was also noted as a gentleman, and several Navy officers were quoted as saying, paraphrasing, "If he'd have been on our side, he'd be one of the most celebrated naval leaders of the era." His entire game was intimidation. He won battles and seized ships by maintaining a ruthless reputation, even though he was documented as being educated, well-mannered, and soft-spoken. Chang Chih-hsin. She was a member of the Chinese Communist Party who complained that democracy and freedom of speech were fundamental rights in communism. In response, she was sent to an all-male prison. Male prisoners were told if they raped and tortured her, they would get their sentence reduced. Despite being beaten and raped multiple times a day, she continued to campaign against the party and wrote notes on the crimes of the party on toilet paper until the guards removed her pen. She died from execution 6 years after entering the prison. After her death, she was considered a hero in China. However, the reasons why she was sent to prison and what happened to her in prison were not mentioned. Instead, her life story was rewritten to say she fought for the party and not against them. Imagine learning about Vlad the Impaler for the first time. A guy who killed dozens, if not hundreds of members of his own family to consolidate power, would impale people ass first on huge wooden spikes which took hours, if not days to kill, was the inspiration for Dracula. His family name meant dragon, and he dipped his bread in the blood of his enemies, while their corpses decorated his table. Sounds wild. I learned in my college history class that much of the seemingly legendary stuff he did was actually just made up as propaganda by the Ottomans. Tarrare also sounds crazy to the point I think his life almost has to be exaggerated. He's this French guy from the late 1700s who constantly craved eating, described as having an abnormally large jaw, an abdomen that would inflate like a balloon and leave a bunch of sagging skin when empty, and able to hold 12 apples in his mouth. Along with that, he was described as constantly hot to the touch and producing a visible vapor from his body. He also ate an entire cat, committing up the skin and bones, and is suspected to have eaten a 14-month-old child. The French military tried to use him to transmit information to spies in enemy territory by having him swallow a small box containing a letter. He was discovered by the Prussians and they chained him to a latrine until he shat the box out. They held a mock execution for him and then let him go home. Also, when he died, an autopsy was performed. They found that apparently, when his mouth was open, you could see all the way down his throat, and that his stomach was extremely enlarged. Samuel Whittemore. On April 19, 1775, British forces were returning to Boston from the battles of Lexington and Concord, the opening engagements of the war. On their march, they were continually shot at by American militiamen. Whittemore was in his fields when he spotted an approaching British relief brigade under Earl Percy, sent to assist the retreat. Whittemore loaded his musket and ambushed the British grenadiers of the 47th Regiment of Foot from behind a nearby stone wall, killing one soldier. He then drew his dueling pistols, killed a second grenadier, and mortally wounded a third. By the time Whittemore had fired his third shot, a British detachment had reached his position. Whittemore drew his sword and attacked. He was subsequently shot in the face, bayoneted numerous times, and left for dead in a pool of blood. He was found by colonial forces, trying to load his musket to resume the fight. He was taken to Dr. Cotton Tufts of Medford, who perceived no hope for his survival. However, Whittemore recovered and lived another 18 years until dying of natural causes at the age of 96. King Leopold II of Belgium. Overall an ad guy who only cared about personal wealth. One or the first to successfully utilize and manipulate the media to frame him positively, even though he was a horrible person. As the owner of Congo during the late 1800s, his methods cost roughly 10 million Africans their life. I think it was either one of his daughters or someone who worked closely with him that once said that the only thing he cared about more than his wealth was making sure none of his daughters would get any of it after his death. Edit, misspelling. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing to see more Reddit reading videos. Have an awesome day.